Boom! Hey Internets, had a good question from Sins Digital, and he said, do you think more and more brands, especially bigger ones, will add more one-of-one tabs on their e-commerce shops where they would be collaborating with artists? I for one see this as a perfect way to generate hype to the brand and support new art platforms. Blah blah blah. Okay. Big part. I see this as a big part of fashion and creation. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Sins Digital, for sorry for the long pause. I was reading through everything, but as I will title or have titled the video, I'm going to talk about collabs for clothing lines, and this crosses a few different ranges. So I've touched on this in a couple different points, but thought we would bring it up again in the way that Sins Digital is talking about. I think they're approaching that for their clothing line. Let me take us back just a little bit. So in the late 90s, early 2000s, where distribution companies would have like 3 companies. So a skateboard company would have a separate clothing company. Instead of integrating it within the company of skate, we would just have tons of companies. So there would be a footwear company, there would be a sister company that was a clothing company, and then a skateboard company. And apparel brands also on its own were huge, right? So LRG was a big hip-hop influenced brand that kind of came from the steps of other just large conglomerate, just apparel brands, okay? Not lifestyle per se, where I would say a skateboard company would be surrounded by the lifestyle of skating and that culture. Whereas I would say a lot of the hip-hop inspired brands were lifestyle, but they were more of a menswear brand. So they're taking an approach on creating collections, actual collections. So in any case, in the late 90s and the early 2000s, a lot of those companies would sponsor pros. They had lavish budgets for marketing, and so a lot of that money would go into kind of collabs. So if you were sponsored, obviously, all of those pros, like pro skateboarders, pro wakeboarders, everything. And then when LRG came into the picture, Jonas and the team were really good at just featuring hip-hop artists. Kanye West was one of the first people that they put out a separate ad for, which was huge. And so all of those artists, so not just professional athletes, but musical artists, all kinds of people that they would put on would want something that was signature. And so that therein lies kind of your collab. And so it was just more frequent then. I was updating some of my portfolios on my portfolio works on johnphenom.co and going through a bunch of old collabs. And I remember working with pro skaters, artists, all kinds of people for either projects or for in-house work when I was, a designer or a senior designer in-house for one of the brands. And so it was a cool process. So let me say this about collabs, because the landscape has changed a lot, and that's the only reason why I bring up the history of how it was more integral before, because now a lot of things are very, very macro and micro, okay? So brands that are out now, sometimes they're already surrounded by an influencer. Those are lines that are doing well, and maybe they're not necessarily brands, but they're lines that are attached to a personality and a persona, whereas that person before might have been a person that might have just been doing a collab for what we would consider more of an established brand or collection. So brands are a great idea. Since that's great that you guys are doing it, and it brings value for sure. The only thing I want to bring up is the math in it in terms of logistical, okay? So I get into this conversation a lot of times when I'm consulting with people, and they say, hey, we're working with this person and that person. So there's a couple lines to be drawn. Should you collaborate with influencers? Absolutely. That should be a huge part of your marketing. Do you need to sponsor like the way it used to be? It depends on their social media equity and how much they're interacting with their fans, because business-wise, you want their fans to become your fans. So it's a smart marriage if it makes sense, and they're talking to the same people that are within your demographic for your brand. It makes a lot of sense. So Randall at Live Fit is, and I don't know him personally, he's super good at curating a team of people that have good social media hype. It's within his culture, the lifestyle of what Live Fit is all about. So he's really good at putting those people together and keeping them active because he's very active. So he leads by example. So just a case study of how sort of collabs or sponsorship is working really good within a brand. So that's a great case study to kind of look at and see someone that's doing it right. I should do a separate video on that. And so that's an example of how it's working nowadays. I would just say be mindful though, for all of my startup brands that are watching this, is of the math, okay? So a lot of times it's not the business that's going to, it's word of mouth. So that money is going into marketing, whereas back in the day, or even now, some of that money, you're not gonna see an immediate return, right? On some Gary Vaynerchuk type action, you're gonna put it out in the atmosphere and then see how it's gonna come back in the ROI in maybe a different way, but it won't come back immediately with math. So realize that, you know, it's a great way to move forward and create awareness for the brand. Is it cheaper for you to just do a collection without a name and shoot a photo shoot and shoot a video and all the coverage with your brand times that collab? Yes, it's way easier to sell your basics and then get the full margin on it and sell, you know, 100 of those is going to be different than selling 100 of a collab item, because I did a whole video, I'll probably link to it, and then it still stands. Like, if you did an item that's a collab item, does the sponsored person get half of that, or what is the arrangement monetarily, right? So if you're cutting anything in half after your cost of making the goods, then it's not going to be as profitable, but it's good for marketing. Okay, so I would just be clear of what you're gaining within that move. When you make that move, what are you gaining from it? Okay, and then a lot of it, if it's social media and the person has a huge following, obviously that's going to be good for your brand. If you're giving a spotlight to someone who doesn't have a huge following but they're doing great things, that's good too. But you're probably going to give them more value in terms of maybe the social media pull, and then the math on the product is going to be categorically something different. So with the business owner mindset, that's different. With the accounting mindset, it's different than making money on like a basic sweatshirt, t-shirt, hat, pant, whatever it is, because the math is, you know, you keep the entire margin. So it's a good is it a good way to continue to market and build? Yes, and it's integral. It's just different from what it was in the past. But there's a lot of, besides Live Fit, there's a couple other case studies of, you can see how people are using it. But it makes common sense. Just want to make sure you know what that is though, with the math side of it. Some people go ham on a lot of different things that won't add up math-wise, and at the end it's a lot of those little things that will end the brand, where you run out of funding or you don't know where the money is. So where people are excited for the fun things of launching and holding a clothing line and putting that out in the atmosphere, you want to keep your eye on what it looks like math-wise for the bottom line and for the lifeblood of the company. Cool. So hope that helps. If you guys have any other questions, anything you want to add to the conversation, please drop it all down below. I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye.